The James Bond franchise is considered to be one of the longest movie franchises in the entirety of the film industry, spanning a grand total of 24 installments and consisting of 7 actors in the popular leading role. One thing that each installment has in common, though, is the inclusion of brilliant leading vehicles, which James Bond himself loved to drive straight into the action. But one of the best and most memorable James Bond cars that have been featured in the franchise, and where do they stack up against one another? Well, today we're going to be looking into that, because today we're going to be counting down our picks for the best Bond cars that have been featured in the last half century. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as well as hitting that post notification bell so you never miss another update from us. The Bentley Mark IV. When it came to the earlier installments of James Bond, classic cars were always preferred above the motor vehicles of the time. The gentleman spy was supposed to be a wealthy ladies' man after all, and what says excessive wealth than a classic vehicle with an insane price tag, right? This is why the Bentley Mark IV makes its way onto the first position with our list, with it being featured as the leading vehicle from Russia with Love. In the film, we see Mr. Bond using the vehicle to have a little picnic with his love interest, but its classic lines and beautiful interior were not enough to solidify it as the focus of this installment of the franchise. As it turns out, the Bentley Mark IV was actually included as a nod to the source material that the cinematic Bond franchise was based on. We're of course talking about the novels, which was written by Ian Fleming, who ended up writing James Bond with a fondness for the 4.5-liter version of the Bentley Mark IV. So, as it turns out, the picking of the Mark IV was an actual Easter egg to the source material that the franchise originally stemmed from. When used in the film, the car was already 30 years old, coming from a time when the war had even commenced. And while it may not have been capable of firing rockets or pulling off some sick vehicular moves, its elegance and rugged good looks were more than enough to secure it as a place on our list. The Bentley Mark IV is just too important to forget. The Ford Mustang Mach 1. Next up on our list, we had the Ford Mustang Mach 1 from Diamonds Are Forever, which showed a bit of a departure from the James Bond films that came before it. Rather than relying on British ingenuity to take Bond from point A to point B, he was given a fast-paced and abstractive American vehicle to show just how his character was starting to develop. The Mach 1 was also considered to be a significant departure from the original Mustang design, incorporating the appearance of a flashback and the roar of a 429 CJR V8 engine. The vehicle featured prominently in a high-intensity car chase through Las Vegas, which had highlighted the abstractiveness that viewers weren't used to seeing from their residential gentleman spy. The Ford Mustang Mach 1 is also remembered as one of the most comedic mishaps for the entirety of the Bond franchise, where James drives it through a narrow alleyway on 2 streets, only to see it emerge from the other side on opposite set of wheels. It's not that often that an editing error can result in one of the most memorable moments from a 24 installment franchise, but it looks like the Mustang Mach 1 is definitely able to hold its hood up high and taking the title in this regard. And with the vehicle looking like a fiery version of Hasselhoff's own kit, it's no wonder that the Mach 1 is still so beloved today. The Lotus E-Spirit Turbo. Next up, we've got the Lotus E-Spirit, which actually was featured in 2 separate Bond films, albeit in the form of 2 separate models. And while many do remember the version in The Spy Who Loved Me, which was capable of transforming itself into a submersive watercraft, it was the introduction of the turbo version for Your Eyes Only that solely sold our hearts. After watching the first version of the car enter into the auto-destruct sequence due to a criminal trying to break into it, Q decided to supply Bond with another version which looked a lot different. The Lotus E-Spirit Turbo was pure white and featured some red racing stripes across both of its sides. It also had a large decal reading Turbo set in red on the hood of the vehicle. Other than these nifty little additions, the vehicle looked incredibly streamlined and presented viewers with a display of jagged lines that were incredibly popular back in the 80s. It was an incredible addition to the Bond vehicles that we had come to love, and a great improvement on the previous Lotus E-Spirit that Bond had previously financed. The fact that its previous version had to be replaced, due to the fact that it blew itself up, was yet another moment to be remembered from the franchise. It's no wonder the newer model was preferred. The Toyota 2000 GT. As we stated earlier, James Bond was always considered to be a bit of a ladies' man. Even before Daniel Craig's Bond lost the love of his life, we saw him sauntering around the casino and making eyes at every woman in a sparkly red dress. But this characteristic of Bond was no better represented in the Sean Connery version of the role, whose velvet voice was used to great effect, so as to make ladies swoon. Sean Connery was, however, quite a tall man, which made it pretty difficult to keep up with the Bond's love for impressive sports cars. One of the favorites amongst fans was the introduction of the tiny Toyota 2000 GT and You Only Live Twice, which Sean Connery had to stuff himself into while remaining as gentlemanly as possible. Regardless of this difficulty, it's not hard to see why this high-performance Japanese motor vehicle is favored when it comes to other cars in the franchise. The Toyota 2000 GT was a rear-wheel, 4-speed gearbox racer that ended up seeing a limited production run of only 351 models before it ended up being discontinued. Simply put, this motor vehicle was incredibly exclusive, even back then. Although all models of the 2000 GT were coupe designs, 2 were specifically built to accommodate the impressive stature of Connery, which is what we got to see in the film. And who could say no to those impressive pop-up lights? The Aston Martin Vantage Volante. In 1987, we ended up seeing the introduction of the Aston Martin Vantage Volante in The Living Daylights, which was the first film with Timothy Dalton as the role of 007. And while previous installments had shown a tendency to showcase previous Aston Martin models, the Vantage was often glanced over. So, when Dalton was given the opportunity to bring the Vantage Volante to the forefront of the spy genre, viewers just couldn't help but use the introduction in order to establish the kind of Bond that he was going to be in the future. Rather than relying on pure speed and an incredible appearance, the Aston Martin Vantage Volante had been knitted out by Q to be a spy's best friend. The Volante came equipped with everything from missiles to lasers and even tire spikes, all of which could be used by the new James Bond in order to put some of the greatest vehicle chassis in history of the franchise. And although the original 580X version of the Volante reached a horsepower of 437, this was increased with an addition of a 6.3-liter variant engine, which ended up increasing to 450 on set. The introduction of the Volante showed just how much the franchise was going to change, with high-tech gadgets being the way of the future. Aston Martin Vanquish. Another Aston Martin that simply can't be forgotten is the incredible Aston Martin Vanquish from the 2002's Die Another Day, which had allowed Pierce Brosnan's James Bond to see everything that he could without risk being seen himself. This was due to the fact that Q had given the vehicle the ability to make it self-invisible using state-of-the-art cloaking technology. It was also named the Vanquish as a result of this little ability that it had. Other than cloaking, the Aston Martin Vanquish had been knitted out with shotguns, machine guns, and a slew of rockets, all of which had come in handy when chasing the infamous villain Zhao in his Jaguar XKR later in the film. The Aston Martin Vanquish was probably the most popular vehicle from Aston Martin when it actually came to the selling of the stock, which increased dramatically after Die Another Day had released in theaters across the globe. And with a horsepower of 460, V8 6 engine, which was able to reach top speeds of 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, it's no wonder that everyone wanted to get their hands on this car. The BMW 750iL. The Vanquish was certainly a departure from what we were used to seeing when it came to Pierce Brosnan's Bond, who had a tendency to appreciate vehicles from the BMW line. By far, the greatest of these was the BMW 750iL, which was used in Tomorrow Never Dies. Back in 1997, this car was known to be the first vehicle on the market to make use of the Xeon headlights and an integrated sat-nav screen, which seems almost commonplace nowadays. The Bond version of the vehicle was stocked to the brim with a greater number of technological wonders that clearly were available on the market. We saw everything from the BMW 750iL, including reinforced windows, an anti-tampering stock system, missiles, wire cutters, caltrops, and a smartphone-style remote control system with mini LCD display. It was a joy to watch, making the film's car chase one of the greatest in franchise history. But by far, one of the more popular James Bond vehicles throughout the franchise history was the Aston Martin DB5, which was first introduced in 1974 with Goldfinger. Funny enough, the DB5 was so favored among fans that it appeared in the sequel to Goldfinger, being 1965's Thunderball, and even made appearances in other James Bond entries such as GoldenEye, Casino Royale, and even Skyfall. The Aston Martin DB5, with its matte silver finish and shiny trimmings, is by far one of the most referenced James Bond cars of all time. Even in the world of model vehicles, it's been said to be one of the most popular purchased by fans across the globe. So, of course, we had to include it on the list. But what do you guys think of our choices? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below, and if you can, please give us a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to ding that notification bell so you never miss another update from us. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.